Advancing the cause of liberty takes more than just coming up with ideas. It means making them happen. This is Society and the State. Life, liberty, and your pursuit of happiness. Now, your hosts, Connor Boyack and Brian Hyde.
Hey everyone, Connor here for episode 86 of Society and the State. Flying solo today. Brian's actually on the road, so we will excuse him, his absence. But I'm joined today by a special guest who you've probably seen on TV, you've seen him online. This guy is prolific on social media and getting the message out there for his organization that we're going to learn a little bit more about today, which is Young Americans for Liberty. Cliff Maloney, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Connor. Glad to be here.
So a lot of people have heard of this organization, but perhaps don't know much about it other than it deals with college kids. So Young Americans for Liberty, tell me, I guess, first of all, is it just college kids, or do you kind of bleed outside of that a little bit? And then tell us a little bit of kind of the background and how the group got started.
Yeah, absolutely. So Young Americans for Liberty, we are a college-based organization that works with college students. Our mission statement is pretty simple: to identify, educate, train, and mobilize youth activists committed to winning on principle. Put simply, we're the youth army on college campuses across the United States that are trying to present a message of limited government, a message of free markets, a message of individual liberty. And the way that we do that, and the way we found a lot of success, is we really focus on doing campus activism or campus recruitment events. So I think that's kind of the not the selling point for the organization, but just something that we really pride ourselves on, is being the best at going out and really engaging and recruiting new people. And I'd be happy to talk to you about some of those activism events as we dive in. But that's kind of our strong suit. I mean, we have done over 3,200 campus recruitment events over the last 12 months. And to me, what we're trying to do is really create this ripple effect. We're trying to create a generational shift so that when people say there's a problem in society, the answer isn't always government, right? We want the answer to be free markets and for people to figure these things out as we, the people, and through our communities. So that's what we're doing, and it's been exciting. You asked about our history. The organization has been around since 2008. We were formed after this old gentleman from Texas decided to run for president, Ron Paul. And he had a Students for Paul, was the name of the group, and it was run by my predecessor, Jeff Frazee. And at the end of the 2008 presidential campaign, there were all these young people that were excited about the principles of limited government. And that was very rare in those days, especially for a Republican to have such excitement. And so Jeff Frazee, my predecessor, decided, you know what, if we start a nonprofit, we could really continue this. It wouldn't have to die off from campaign to campaign.
Right.
And so that's what he did. He started Young Americans for Liberty. We just had a few chapters and, out spreading the message and really trying to keep that mission statement and reaching people. And Connor, the cool thing is we started with less than 100 chapters. We're up to 900 chapters as of today. So just really some explosive growth, and happy to be where we're at. I'm excited for the future. That's
impressive. So I do want to talk to you about some of these activism projects in a moment. First, let me ask you this. FEE is a great organization, Foundation for Economic Education, that is now, they target college kids. They're also going into the high school level. And then you've got, Tuttle Twins and this new group we've launched, the Association for Teaching Kids Economics, which focuses at a K through 8 level. Where you guys are working at college level, I want to ask you this. With your recruitment events, are you more in the business of finding college students who are already like-minded, who have already been exposed to these ideas, and then equipping them and mobilizing them? Or are you finding that you have to find students who may be partially interested or curious, and you're having to educate them before you can then activate them?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's two significant sectors that we try to target. Let me start with a story, and then I'll answer the question. So one of the things I found is just based through our experience and kind of polling and understanding some of the students we're working with on college campuses, I think that there is this misconception that young people, and specifically 18, years old to 22-year-olds, so the college students we're working with, there's this misconception that all of them are liberal or all of them are should we say, they think government's the answer to all of our problems, right? The Bernie bros, if you know what I mean. And what we have found is it's just not true. When college students come to campus as freshmen, the vast majority, and I would put it up near 90%, 90% of them are apathetic. They are not thinking in terms of the best, solutions for society, or thinking about philosophy, or thinking about politics. They're trying to have a beer at night, or they're trying to get their degree, or they're trying to, have friends and really just find their way. And by the way, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I always like to share this as a kind of a philosophical and political wonk. We're not normal folks. And the folks listening to this, let me offend some of your viewers. You're probably not normal because, you care about these things and you're passionate about it. And that is a minority of individuals in this country. So what we're tasked to do, back to your question, is we're trying to really reach, I would call those, low-hanging fruit. There's 90% of students that, they're just not engaged. And so it's not that they're on the left or that they're liberal or that they, think government's the answer to all of our problems. It's just that they're not thinking about these things. And so that's the first group we go after, are people who are looking to get involved maybe, but they haven't really thought much about, philosophy or politics. And we try to engage them, give them a reason to get involved, really explain the ideas to them, and get them to take action and become a developed Young Americans for Liberty leader. The other section, though, is, of course, people that from any ideology, may disagree with us and, may have some leanings. And, of course, we're trying to convert folks. We're trying to reach people. But I will tell you that one of the things we teach our activists is, my gosh, we haven't reached enough people yet for us to spend, 30 minutes arguing with a socialist and kind of wasting your time. So I don't want to sound like I'm somebody that thinks, we should shun or we shouldn't try to reach out to people across different political spectrums or philosophical spectrums. But I think you need to be really, really reasonable with your time because time is value and time is money. And, our efforts, we need to be effective. And so I think we really try to spend most of our time, the majority of our time, recruiting those people that, they're looking potentially to get involved, but they have no real understanding, and we're trying to educate them and try to get them to take action. Now, does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, that does, and it leads really well into the next one, talking about taking action. So you guys do a lot of these mobilization activism events. We've seen them here in campuses in our backyard and online, seen lots of posts about them around the country. I'm going to rattle off a few just so our listeners have kind of a little teaser for what they can find on yaliberty.org. We'll also link to that on the show notes page for today that I'll announce later. You've got several of these, right? Restore the Fourth, Fight for Free Speech, Axe the Tax, Incarceration Nation, Visualize the Debt, Civil Liberties Graveyard. Each of these are kind of, a stunt designed to attract attention, get people curious, get them talking to the YAL folks and engage them and sign them up and educate and activate them. Talk to me briefly about what you think has been the most notable or disruptive project that you guys have worked on. What stands out among these and other activism opportunities that you guys have done? What stands out to you?
Yeah. Well, let me start. I appreciate you listing those off because sometimes I can't get through them all. So when the host does it, you can show some of our depth, and I appreciate that. So right now, I would say let me answer this in I'll give two examples. Two of these projects I think I want to highlight for you. So the first one is the National Fight for Free Speech campaign. Okay. So this has been an effort. We started this roughly a year and a half, 2 years ago, as an effort to combat a lot of the push and the emotion and the kind of shutdown that we have seen on college campuses just over the last couple of years. I mean, everybody sees some of these images coming out of Berkeley where they're lighting the campus on fire and throwing rocks through windows because they disagree with a conservative speaker. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. But the other part of this that a lot of people do not look into, and this is, to me, the most interesting part. So these universities have started using what they call free speech zones. Mm-hmm. And they're really muzzle zones is what we call them, because it does the opposite of promote free speech. And they use these unconstitutional codes to create, these zones. So imagine the campus is a tennis court, and you take your iPhone out and you put it down on the tennis court, and that's the free speech zone. I mean, we literally have a case in court right now where that is the situation at L.A. Pierce College. And that's the situation we find on a lot of these campuses. And with bureaucrats, here's what they do, Connor. They're smart. As much as we don't want to give them credit, they copy each other when something works. And so what they have found is that they can get away with doing this, and it gives them control. And so let's say that our campus group is out handing constitutions out, which to me should not be controversial. Let's say we're handing out constitutions. A bureaucrat will come up if we're outside the free speech zone, and they'll threaten us, that you have to go into the free speech zone or we'll shut you down.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to take some time. I think it's important for your viewers to hear this about some of the most egregious cases, if you will, of what has happened. But long story short, if Bernie's chapter, one of their groups, the progressive groups, or the Democrat Socialists of America, if they're out and they're doing, let's say a push to make the income tax 90% on all Americans, right? Nobody bats an eye. Now, I'm not saying it happens every time, but what I am saying is I don't think any bureaucrat or college administrator or student affairs staffer, they should not have the ability to dictate when things should be shut down and when they shouldn't be. And that is the power that they get when these free speech muzzle zones are in place on campuses, because they get to have that jurisdiction. Where if you get rid of the codes and you open it up, my gosh, they can't decide. So I like to think it's a gift I'm giving to the bureaucrats when we go in and we actually overturn these, unconstitutional codes. So through the Fight for Free Speech campaign, is the first one I want to highlight. The cool thing about that campaign is that we have focused on not only educating and recruiting students about the issue, but on going after and reforming and tackling and overturning these unconstitutional speech codes. We've done that successfully now on 35 American college campuses.
Wow. So
35 schools we've gone into, they've had an unconstitutional speech code, and either through litigation, through letters, through a threat of lawsuit, whatever we need to do, we've been able to get rid of them so that, look, all ideologies have the opportunity to be heard, and, we get rid of any type of bias, which to me is better than a lot of the groups on the right that just kind of complain about this,
Mm-hmm.
So we're taking direct action there. Three real quick, or let me see how many I can get through, but I'm going to share a few stories with you. The first one is we had a student named Jeff Lyons. He goes to school in Massachusetts, served in the United States Navy, put his life on the line to defend the country, the Constitution, took an oath to it. Goes on campus after he gets out of the service. He's in school in Massachusetts, wants to start a YL chapter, big believer in the Constitution. He's handing out constitutions on campus. They stop him. They tell him he must, cease and desist because the Constitution is not an approved document. You have to get all documents approved that you hand out. I mean, talk about irony. That's the first one I'll share. The second one is we had a student rolling around a free speech ball. We do these huge, 10 feet tall beach balls that we call free speech balls. Kids can write on them with Sharpies and express some free speech, and it's a great advocacy tool. And we had a student stopped in Arkansas and was told that he cannot, do this unless he's in the free speech zone because the free speech zone trumps the United States Constitution. We think that's a great line and something I wanted to share with you. And then the whipped cream and cherry on top of our entire program has been our case in Michigan. We had a school in Michigan. We have 3 young people out recruiting and doing a free speech event, handing out pocket constitutions. And the university not only stopped them and told them they had to go to the free speech zone, but they refused. I'll call them patriots or 3L activists because that's what they are. They refused, and the administration actually had these kids arrested, put in jail overnight for handing out pocket constitution, which, as we know, grants them the right to free speech. And so one of the most ironic cases, that's been something that we're going through litigation on right now. But it's an interesting, emotional kind of a lot of pressure out there on college campuses, but we think we're fighting back in a way that is tactic. it's pushing back in a way that is actually going to reach people.
For sure.
And give them that ability to hear different ideologies. So I know I probably went over there, but that's the National Fight for Free Speech campaign, 35 wins across campuses in the U.S. If you count the total amount of students we've restored free speech rights to that will be able to hear all ideologies and hopefully come towards our principles, it's close to 700,000 people. So we see that as some immediate impact, and we're pretty proud of that.
Now, I'm going to link for our listeners to a previous episode where we talked to the folks from the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education about this topic. Very important topic. You guys have been playing a central role in trying to overturn these arcane, restrictive policies. So we'll link to that also on today's show notes page, which I'll announce in a few minutes. And so I'm glad that you highlight that as one of the more notable activism projects, because it is so potent. It affects people beyond those who just agree with us. It's not just for, selfish benefit, right? That y'all folks are doing this. It's even for those who disagree with us that we want them to have those same free speech rights. Let me ask my next question this way. I find that whether through these student groups or just in the media, a lot of our attention gets carried to national issues where we can have less of an impact. We focus on big issues, understandably so, right? Like auditing the Fed, right? Like these are super important issues, and yet they are very tough to affect change in. You guys are doing something a little different now that I want you to talk about for a minute or two. About this new operation, Win at the Door, where you're getting these students to focus at a local level. So tell us a little bit about that project and why focus on the state and local level as opposed to the federal level.
Right. So Young Americans for Liberty, we have a youth army of students, right? That's what gives us a benefit. We have ideas that people believe in, and that motivates them to take action. I mean, I like to think of it as we build the youth army here at YAL, and then we take action. So what is that action that we're taking? So through our C4 organization, what we're able to do is, we really looked and said, okay, where can we have the greatest impact? And first thing is to figure out, what's your tactic? What are you actually doing? And I think a lot of groups miss this. What is the tactic that will set you apart and give you an advantage and actually produce positive results, election wins, when you get involved in elections? And so we looked at this, and we looked at, okay, do we want to send mail? Do we want to put radio ads up? Do we want to be on TV? Do we want to do digital ads? Do we want to knock doors? And it couldn't be any more obvious. The ultimate advantage that we have is deploying our youth activists to knock doors. Nobody else can do what we do because we have such a large and expansive network, and they believe in something. So they're going to be dedicated at what they do. They're going to be great at reaching people at the door. Why would I waste money on mail? Why would I waste money on TV and radio? I mean, all the big-time, big government politicians, establishment folks that, are the go-along to get-along politicians, they all do that. That's not our competitive advantage. So that's what I decided right off the bat with my team was that has got to be the tactic we want to use, is deploying our students to knock doors and take our message directly to the voters, to cut through all the clutter and all the noise. Then we had to decide at what level. Do we do all races, everything from dog catcher up to President of the United States? Or, do we do what a lot of these national groups do and just focus at the federal level, do congressional and senatorial elections? Well, what I started to realize was the broader liberty movement has kind of had this gap, and that gap is that we don't have a bench. Okay, every time a seat opens up in Congress, we do the same song and dance. Do we have any viable candidates? Who are they? Where are they? And it's the same vicious circle. There's nobody. And so what makes somebody viable for Congress? Well, either A, you're a self-funder, or B, you're already elected and you have kind of a donor base and a volunteer base, and you understand the voters in your district, and you've got some good data to run on and to reach people. And I realized, well, okay, what does it take to be a state leader? Or, somebody elected to the state office. And that's when we started to really look into state senate and state rep, and we realized very quickly that focusing on the state house or the lower branch of government in any of the state legislative, breakdowns, some states are called delegates, some states it's state assembly, some states it's state rep or state house. But there's 5,400 of these seats across the country that are the lower state houses. So 5,400 seats for us to look at. And we decided that that's where we think we can have the most impact. I think that if you knock 30,000 doors, which is what we aim to do, we send 10 activists into a district. We knock 30,000 doors. We truly think we can move the needle by 10 points or more because we think we can have that much of an impact on turning people out. Could you have an impact if you did that in Senate races or congressional races? You might, but I don't want to do things where we might have an impact. I want to really own a space that will lead to the direct development of future Ron Pauls, future Rand Pauls, future Justin Amash and Thomas Massey's. So that's the whole game plan for Operation Win at the Door. Find principled candidates that are both viable and principled. They have a chance to win. Endorse them. Deploy 10 students into the district for 1 month, knock 30,000 doors, and bring victories to these people. Now, the reason for this, I like to share this, because some people say, well, who cares if you win a state rep race? We have been playing from the sidelines for so long, Connor. We've been throwing bombs, hoping that they stick. They're not hitting anybody, right? We need people on the inside elected that can have a microphone, that can have legitimacy, a voting record to show that, hey, other people can follow my lead. And most importantly, we build a bench of future Ron Pauls and future Liberty legislators at the federal level. So we work the state level to have that bench ready to go when a federal seat either opens up or they're ready to take on the current incumbent. So that's the plan. Let me share with you our first execution. We found a race in Texas where we had a Liberty lover named Mays Middleton running against an incumbent. And I use that I want to be strict and make sure everybody out there hears that. An incumbent. We ran against an entrenched incumbent that stands for everything that we don't stand for. Big government, cronyist, just not a good person, does not want to limit government. And we found Mays Middleton, who is a pro-liberty candidate, scored very well on our survey, and he was running against this incumbent. And we decided that was going to be the race. So we deployed students down there. We knocked nearly 30,000 doors, and we beat the incumbent by 14 percentage points.
Wow.
So that was our first case, study, if you will. And what we're trying to do now is I'm trying to continue to do races. We have 5 races ongoing currently, so we scaled up pretty quickly. We're in Georgia, we're in Texas, Nevada, South Carolina, and we are in Kentucky. So Kentucky, Georgia, and Texas have their election. The Texas one's a runoff, but the other 2 are the regular primary, all on Tuesday. So we're watching closely. You should keep an eye on us to see what those results show. And then Nevada and South Carolina are on June 12th. So we're going to continue to scale up. My goal is to do 30 races in 2018. And if we can prove concept that this works, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't scale the heck out of it. And my 5-year goal is to elect 200 to 250 state reps, and I think across the country. And I think if people really think about it, it's the first real program where Liberty candidates, it's scalable to elect Liberty candidates. It's tangible, meaning you see the results, and measurable because you can't run from it. On election night, either you win or you lose. And so I'm really sticking my neck out to say, you know what, I don't want us to just sit around anymore as a movement. I don't want us to just continue to educate. We will educate at Yale. We will build our youth army. We will push people back from the brink of socialism. But we have got to deploy to build this bench. And if we elect 250 people to state rep over the next 5 years, I think we're on to something very big that will have tremendous impact on the future of the country.
Now, I don't think you intended, as we conclude here, to set it up this way necessarily. When you give this visualization of the bench, I tend to think of, warming the bench, as it were, right? You were talking about we need the future federal leaders, but that is not at all to diminish the power and influence that these elected officials can and will have in office in their capacity as state legislator, where you can pass a number of very pro-liberty bills. I speak from experience working at a state level with pro-liberty legislators, enacting substantive change and improving the lives of hundreds of thousands or millions of people, right? So that is the capacity, that is the potential that your program has as you guys scale this up and get a lot more state elected officials who believe in these ideas. Yes, there's the potential down the road for having that trickle up effect and getting them to run for Congress and having an even broader impact, hopefully. But there's going to be a lot of good outcome coming from just the immediate results of getting these guys in office. You certainly would agree with that.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the silver lining, if you will. We don't want to get too excited because I mean, even when you look at Congress and certain things now, when you only have a handful, it can be difficult. So I want to keep expectations where they need to be. But absolutely, I mean, think about this. If we can go in and end up electing like 20 state reps over 2 or 3 cycles, I mean, that they own the legislature. Now, they might not be the majority, but what I'm saying is, if they're a voting bloc that is strong enough to, be needed to pass any legislation, boom, that's what you need, And so I think you're right that they could really influence things, and that's part of what we're trying to do is to build this bench, elect state representatives, because honestly, the state policy, there's a lot more liberty being taken away in some of these state houses than there are at the federal level. And it's on us to make sure that our liberties are being defended.
Now, a final question is a rather obvious one. A lot of our listeners who may be excited by what you guys are doing are no longer in college or not young enough to then be heading into college. How can the broader public support your guys' work and tell us how people can get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I'll say is recommend candidates. If you know somebody locally who really is a liberty candidate, and by the way, we don't care what party they run under. Now, right now, we've endorsed a lot of Republicans, and people, from other parties get mad at that. But I need to find candidates, I don't care what party they're in, that are principled and they are viable. Those are the 2 things we care about. So you can recommend candidates, and you can check out everything at yaliberty.org/door. But the most important thing you can do is to chip in financially to support our efforts. It is a battle every day to keep up with the energy and excitement of our door knockers and our entire network and just expansive chapter growth. So donating to YEL, we are a 501c4 when we're talking about raising money for Operation Win at the Door. But you can do that at yaliberty.org/contribute. And I can't tell you how much it means to us. Your money goes directly towards funding a student for a deployment, pays for their food, it pays for their gas money, and it pays for their housing to put them on the ground for 30 days. So I don't care if you're chipping in, $5 or $5,000. Every dollar counts, and we appreciate the support.
That's great, Cliff. As I mentioned for our listeners, we're going to link to all of this stuff at societyandthestate.com/86, which is the episode for today. Cliff, you guys are doing great work. I personally am a supporter. We work oftentimes with the YAL folks on our campuses here in our state. Good luck to you guys, and thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Keep up the great work. Appreciate the podcast, all right?
You've been listening to Society and the State. For show notes, archives, and more great content, visit societyandthestate.com.